My name is Dora, 68 years old, and I became a widow last year after 40 years of marriage. This morning, I received a text message from my son Jeffrey that read, "Start packing, Mom. The house has been sold." I smiled as I read it because I had already packed. What Jeffrey doesn't know is that his father left me more than just this house. There's a pension and a beautiful second home in Spain that I never mentioned. If you're watching this video, please let me know where you're viewing from and hit subscribe to follow my journey from being controlled to finding freedom. I met Harold during my sophomore year at the University of Michigan. I was 19 studying interior design and he was 21 already focused on law school. We bumped into each other at the library where I was researching color theory and he was studying for his LSAT. Harold asked to share my table because the library was packed. By the time we left 5 hours later, I was completely smitten with his confidence and ambitious plans. Our courtship was swift and intense. Harold knew exactly what he wanted in life, and somehow I became part of that vision. We married 2 weeks after my graduation, and that's when the subtle shifts began. Harold suggested I put my interior design career on hold while he established himself at a prestigious law firm in Chicago. It made sense at the time. One of us needed to focus on building our home while the other built a career. "You're so good at making spaces beautiful, Dora," he would say. "Our home should be your canvas." I believed him. I truly did. The years passed quickly. Our finances were entirely managed by Harold. He set up a joint account but kept separate accounts for his investments. Each month he would transfer what he called household funds to our joint account. When I asked about our overall financial situation, he would pat my hand and say, "Don't worry your pretty head about that. I've got it all under control." And I let him. Looking back now, I can see how I surrendered my financial independence piece by piece. 3 years into our marriage, Jeffrey was born. He was the spitting image of Harold. Same determined chin, same analytical eyes that seemed to evaluate everything. Harold was ecstatic to have a son. "He'll carry on the family name," Harold would say, proudly cradling baby Jeffrey. "He's going to be a lawyer like his old man." As Jeffrey grew, I watched him absorb his father's mannerisms and values, the way he organized his toys methodically, the way he would plan his activities with precision unusual for a child. Harold encouraged these traits, spending evenings teaching Jeffrey chess and discussing logical puzzles with him. "He's got a brilliant mind," Harold would tell me, "not artistic like you, but sharp, analytical." There was always that subtle comparison, that hint that Harold valued his own traits more than mine. By the time Jeffrey was in high school, he was already set on following his father's footsteps. Harold beamed with pride when Jeffrey was accepted to the University of Chicago Law School, his alma mater. I was proud too, of course, but sometimes I wondered if Jeffrey had ever considered any other path. During Jeffrey's second year of law school, he met Stephanie. She was studying corporate law, ambitious and meticulous. When Jeffrey brought her home for Thanksgiving, I noticed how Harold immediately approved of her. They spoke the same language, had the same goals. Stephanie looked at me with polite interest when I showed her my latest home renovation project, but her eyes lit up when Harold discussed investment strategies. After they married, Stephanie became Harold's ally in many ways. They would discuss Jeffrey's career trajectory as if it were a business plan. When they visited, I'd often find Harold, Jeffrey, and Stephanie huddled in the living room talking about stocks and real estate opportunities while I prepared dinner alone in the kitchen. It was during their 5th year of marriage that I discovered the house in Spain. I was searching for our passport in Harold's home office. We were planning a rare vacation to visit my sister in Florida when I found documents in his private filing cabinet. The cabinet was usually locked, but that day, Harold had left it open. Inside was a folder labeled Valencia Property. Curious, I opened it to find photos of a stunning Mediterranean villa along with ownership papers in Harold's name. The purchase had been completed 3 years earlier without a single mention to me. When I confronted Harold that evening, showing him the papers with trembling hands, he seemed more annoyed at my snooping than concerned about having kept such a significant purchase secret. "It's an investment property, Dora," he explained dismissively. "I was going to surprise you when the time was right. I'm building our retirement nest egg." "But Harold, this is a major decision. We should have discussed it together." He sighed, that familiar sound that indicated I was being difficult. "This is exactly why I handle the finances. You get emotional over business decisions. This property will appreciate significantly over the next decade. It's a smart move." Will we ever live there? I asked, looking at the beautiful terrace overlooking the sea. His expression softened slightly. Of course. When I retire, we'll spend winters there away from the Chicago cold. You'll love it. That promise kept me going through the next few years. As Harold approached retirement, I began dreaming of our new life in Spain. I learned basic Spanish phrases using audio lessons while cleaning the house. I researched Valencia's culture and cuisine. I imagined myself painting on that terrace, finally rekindling my artistic passions that had been dormant for decades. Harold rarely brought up the Spain property, but whenever I mentioned it, he would nod and say, "All in good time, Dora, all in good time." I believed that our relationship would transform once Harold retired. Without the pressures of his job, perhaps he would relax his control. Perhaps we would become equal partners at last. Perhaps in Spain, surrounded by beauty and warmth, we would rediscover each other. I spent 40 years hoping for that transformation. 40 years being the supporting character in Harold's life story. 40 years waiting for my turn to shine. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Harold was 72, 3 months into his retirement. We were having breakfast on the patio, something we'd never had time for during his working years. I had just poured his second cup of coffee when he clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. "Harold," I reached across the table, knocking over my orange juice. "Harold, what's wrong?" He couldn't speak. His eyes locked with mine, filled with shock and fear. Then he collapsed. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but Harold was gone before they could get him to the hospital. Massive heart attack, they said. Quick and unavoidable. The following days passed in a blur. I moved through the funeral arrangements like a sleepwalker, nodding at appropriate times, accepting condolences from Harold's colleagues, most of whom I barely knew despite decades of holiday parties and firm dinners. Jeffrey took charge immediately. He arranged the funeral service, contacted Harold's firm about pension matters, and stayed at the house for the first few nights. Stephanie came by daily, bringing perfectly packaged meals and organizing Harold's clothes for donation. "You don't need to worry about anything, Mom," Jeffrey assured me. "Dad made sure everything was in order. I'll handle all the paperwork." I nodded gratefully, still numb with grief and shock. But beneath that numbness was something else, something I wasn't ready to acknowledge yet, a strange sense of possibility. A week after the funeral, Jeffrey suggested we meet with Harold's attorney to discuss the will. Thomas has been Dad's lawyer for 30 years. He'll explain everything clearly. Thomas Gordon's office was in the same downtown building where Harold had worked for decades. As we sat in the leather chairs across from his desk, I felt like I was entering Harold's world for the first time. "Mrs. Wallace, before we begin, I want to express my deepest condolences," Thomas said kindly. "Harold was not just my client, but a dear friend." Jeffrey sat beside me, notepad ready. "Let's go through the estate details, Thomas. What are we looking at?" Thomas glanced at me, then back at Jeffrey. "Perhaps I should speak with your mother privately first." Jeffrey frowned. "I'm helping my mother with all the legal and financial matters. You can speak freely." I touched Jeffrey's arm gently. "It's okay, honey. Maybe it's better if I talk to Thomas alone first, and then you can join us." The look Jeffrey gave me was so reminiscent of Harold's disapproval that I nearly rescinded my request. But something made me hold firm. After Jeffrey reluctantly stepped out, Thomas's demeanor changed subtly. "Mrs. Wallace, Dora, there are aspects of Harold's estate that he explicitly wanted to discuss with you privately first." Thomas pulled out a thick file. "Harold left everything to you. Not in trust, not with conditions, but directly to you." "Everything?" I asked, confused. "What exactly does that include?" Thomas proceeded to outline assets I had only partially been aware of, significant investments, a generous pension that would continue to pay out for the rest of my life, the house in Chicago fully paid off, and the property in Valencia, Spain. "The Valencia property is particularly valuable," Thomas explained. "Harold purchased it outright 5 years ago. It's in an exclusive area with property values that have nearly doubled since purchase." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. "There's something else, Dora," Thomas said, his voice gentler. "Harold left a letter for you." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Harold's precise handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Dora, if you're reading this, I've left you sooner than planned. I know I've controlled our finances completely throughout our marriage. It was how my father operated, and I followed suit without questioning. I realize now that wasn't fair to you. Everything is yours now, to use, to sell, to give away as you see fit. You've supported my career and raised our son with unwavering dedication. The freedom to choose your path forward is the least you deserve. One word of caution: Jeffrey has adopted my approach to finance and family. He may feel entitled to direct these assets. Stand firm. This is your life now. The house in Valencia was always meant for you. I saw how your eyes lit up when you discovered it. Go there if you wish. Paint again. Live the life you deferred for me. Harold. Tears blurred my vision as I folded the letter. After 40 years of marriage, this was perhaps the most genuine acknowledgement Harold had ever given me. When Jeffrey rejoined us, Thomas provided a carefully edited overview. I watched my son's expression as Thomas mentioned the Chicago house and a modest savings amount. I said nothing about the pension or the Spain property. Something in Harold's letter had resonated deeply, awakening a caution I hadn't known I possessed. That evening after Jeffrey and Stephanie left, I called Thomas privately. The other assets, the pension and Spain property, I'd like to keep those confidential for now, I said. That's entirely your right, Thomas assured me. Everything is in your name. You don't need Jeffrey's approval or signature for anything. Could you help me set up separate accounts, ones that Jeffrey wouldn't know about? There was a brief pause. Dora, is everything all right with you and Jeffrey? I considered the question. Jeffrey is very much his father's son. I need some space to figure out what I want for my future. I understand, Thomas said. I can help arrange that. And Dora, for what it's worth, I think Harold would approve of you taking control now. Over the next few days, I began researching Valencia online. The property was in a beautiful coastal area with access to cultural activities, expatriate communities, and medical facilities. I found myself smiling as I browsed through local markets and art centers. For the first time in decades, I was making plans for myself by myself. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. The first sign that something was changing with Jeffrey came 3 weeks after Harold's funeral. He began stopping by, unannounced, usually around dinner time. Just checking in on you, Mom, he would say, walking through the house with an appraising eye, making sure you're doing okay on your own. At first, I appreciated his concern, but then the questions started. Mom, have you thought about what you're going to do with this big house? He asked one evening while I was serving coffee. It's a lot for one person to maintain. I'm managing fine, I replied. Your father and I love this house. Of course, but practicality has to factor in. The property taxes alone must be substantial. His tone was identical to Harold's when discussing sensible decisions. The next weekend, he brought Stephanie and their 10-year-old daughter Amanda. While Amanda watched TV, Jeffrey and Stephanie walked through each room of the house discussing it as if I weren't present. This formal dining room is wasted space, Stephanie remarked. No one needs a 12-person dining table these days. And these maintenance costs must be draining her savings, Jeffrey added. The responsible thing would be to downsize. I remained silent, observing this dynamic with new awareness. After they left, I called Jane, my oldest friend, and the only person who had consistently encouraged my independence throughout my marriage to Harold. They're already planning what to do with my house, I told her. Jeffrey hasn't said it directly, but I can feel it coming. Harold Jr. takes after his father, Jane said dryly. She'd never been fond of Harold's controlling nature. What are you thinking, Dora? I'm not sure yet, but I think I need to protect myself somehow. The following week, Stephanie arrived alone with a folder tucked under her arm. Jeffrey and I have been researching some options for you, she announced, spreading brochures across my kitchen counter. They were all for retirement communities and senior apartments. This one is only 15 minutes from our house. She pointed to a glossy photo of a modern apartment complex. They have activities, security, and medical staff on call. No more worrying about maintenance or yard work. That's thoughtful, Stephanie, but I'm not ready for that kind of change. She gave me a sympathetic look that didn't reach her eyes. Dora, it's not about being ready. It's about being practical. This house is from another chapter of your life. Jeffrey and I worry about you rattling around in this big place alone. When I didn't immediately agree, Stephanie shifted tactics. You know, Amanda was just saying how much she misses having you around more. If you lived closer, you could be a bigger part of her daily life. The guilt tactic, another familiar strategy from my years with Harold. The next escalation came when Jeffrey brought a financial advisor to Sunday dinner, without warning me in advance. Mom, this is Greg Sullivan. He specializes in estate planning for widows. I thought he could give you some advice. Before I could object, they had spread financial paperwork across my dining room table. Greg asked pointed questions about my expenses, savings, and future needs, while Jeffrey answered most of them for me. Mom's never been very involved with the finances, he explained to Greg. Dad handled everything. That's not unusual for her generation. Greg nodded understandingly. The good news is, with your help, we can create a plan that ensures her comfort while preserving assets for the next generation. I sat silently watching this performance with growing unease. Neither man seemed to notice my discomfort, or perhaps they simply didn't value my opinion just as Harold often hadn't. That night, I called Thomas Gordon again. I think Jeffrey is planning something regarding the house, I confided. He keeps bringing up downsizing and estate planning. Has he asked you to sign anything? Thomas sounded concerned. Not yet, but he's setting the stage. Don't sign anything without consulting me first, Thomas advised. And Dora, you might want to consider what you actually want your next chapter to look like. If Valencia interests you, perhaps a visit would be worthwhile. The turning point came unexpectedly during a dinner at Jeffrey and Stephanie's home. After the meal, Jeffrey asked me to stay at the table while Stephanie took Amanda upstairs for bedtime. Mom, I want to talk to you about something important. He began, his expression serious. Stephanie and I have been discussing your situation, and we think it's time to make some changes. My situation? I echoed. Your living arrangement. The house is too large, the maintenance too costly. We think it would be best to sell it while the market is strong. I felt a chill. That's a major decision, Jeffrey, one that I should make for myself. He reached across the table to pat my hand, exactly as Harold used to do. Mom, this isn't something you need to worry about. We'll handle everything. The proceeds would secure your future care, and anything left over would go toward Amanda's college fund. Dad would want his hard-earned assets to benefit his granddaughter's education. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what was happening. Jeffrey wasn't concerned about my well-being. He was laying claim to what he viewed as his inheritance. Just as Harold had controlled me financially for decades, Jeffrey was positioning himself to take over that role. I need time to think about this, I managed to say. Of course. He smiled clearly, believing I would eventually acquiesce, as I always had with Harold. Take all the time you need. Stephanie and I have already started researching potential buyers just to get an idea of the market. On my way out that evening, I overheard Stephanie on the phone in the kitchen. We're moving forward with selling Dora's house. Jeffrey's handling it. The real estate agent thinks we can list within the month. They weren't asking for my input. They were informing me of decisions already made. 2 days later, I accidentally intercepted a call meant for Jeffrey when I answered his cell phone during his brief visit to my house. He had left it on the counter while using the bathroom. Mr. Wallace, this is Sandra from Lakeside Realty. I wanted to confirm our appointment to view your mother's property tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, this is Dora Wallace, Jeffrey's mother. There must be some mistake. I haven't agreed to list my house. There was an awkward pause. Oh, I apologize for the confusion. Jeffrey Wallace authorized us to begin the listing process and mentioned he had power of attorney. I'll need to clarify this with him directly. Power of attorney. I had signed no such document. When Jeffrey emerged from the bathroom, I confronted him immediately. Why does your realtor think you have power of attorney over my affairs? His face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You were eavesdropping on my business calls. Answer the question, Jeffrey. Did you tell someone you have legal authority over my property? He adjusted his tie, another gesture so like Harold that it momentarily disoriented me. Mom, let's be reasonable. You're 78 and recently widowed. Your decision-making may be compromised by grief. I'm simply looking out for your best interests just as Dad would want me to. I'm 68, not 78, I corrected coldly, and I am perfectly capable of making my own decisions. For the first time since Harold's death, I saw Jeffrey clearly not as my beloved son, but as the product of Harold's values and worldview. He viewed me not as an autonomous person, but as an extension of his father's estate, something to be managed and controlled. That night I met secretly with Jane at a coffee shop across town. "He's trying to sell my house without my permission," I told her, still shaking with anger. "He even told a realtor he has power of attorney." Jane reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Dora, this is financial abuse. You realize that, right? First Harold, now Jeffrey. You've spent your whole adult life being controlled by the men who should respect you most." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I had never framed it that way, but she was right. "What should I do?" I whispered. "What do you want to do?" Jane countered. "For once in your life, what do you want, Dora? Not what Harold wanted, not what Jeffrey expects. What do you dream of?" Without hesitation, I said Valencia, the house in Spain, starting fresh somewhere beautiful where no one sees me as just an extension of Harold or a burden to manage. Jane smiled. "Then I think you have your answer." The situation reached its breaking point on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I returned from grocery shopping to find Jeffrey in my driveway with a man I didn't recognize. "Mom," Jeffrey called as I pulled in. "This is Martin from Elite Home Appraisals. He's just going to take a quick look around the property." I stayed in my car, engine running. "I haven't agreed to sell the house, Jeffrey." "Mom, we've discussed this. It's the sensible thing to do." "No, you discussed it. You decided it. There's a difference." Martin looked uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other in the rain. "Mrs. Wallace, I can come back another time if this isn't convenient," he offered. "There won't be another time," I said firmly. "I'm not selling my home." Jeffrey's face darkened. "Mom, you're being irrational. Dad always said you struggled with financial decisions. Let me handle this for you." Something snapped inside me. 40 years of deferring to Harold, and now Jeffrey expected the same compliance. "Get off my property," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Both of you. Now." Martin mumbled an apology and quickly retreated to his car. Jeffrey stood his ground, rain soaking through his expensive suit. "You're making a mistake," he said coldly. "That house is too much for you. The responsible thing would be to sell it and secure your future care. My future is not your decision to make." We stared at each other across the driveway, rainwater streaming between us. In that moment, I saw not my little boy who once brought me dandelion bouquets, but Harold's son, entitled, controlling, and utterly certain of his own rightness. "I'm trying to help you," he insisted. "No, Jeffrey, you're trying to control me just like your father did. The difference is I'm not going to allow it anymore." He left eventually, tires squealing on the wet pavement. That night, Stephanie called, her voice honey-sweet with concern. "Dora, Jeffrey told me about your disagreement. I understand change is frightening at your age, but we're only thinking of your well-being." "At my age," I repeated flatly. "I'm 68, Stephanie, not 98. I'm in perfect health and perfectly capable of making my own decisions." She sighed dramatically. "We're organizing a family dinner on Sunday. Please come. Jeffrey feels terrible about your argument. Let's discuss this calmly as a family." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The dinner turned out to be an ambush. Jeffrey, Stephanie, and even Amanda had clearly been primed to convince me of the wisdom of selling the house. "Grandma," Amanda said during dessert, "Mom says when you move to a smaller place, I can help decorate your new room. Won't that be fun?" "My new room?" I asked, looking sharply at Stephanie. "We've been considering the guest suite in our basement," Stephanie explained smoothly. "It would be perfect for you, close to family but with your own space." "The basement?" I repeated. "How generous." Jeffrey jumped in. "It makes perfect sense financially. Why pay for another property when we have space right here? And the money from selling your house could go to more important things." "Like what?" I challenged. Amanda answered innocently. "My college fund and my dance lessons. And Daddy says we can finally build that pool in the backyard." Stephanie shot her daughter a warning look, but it was too late. I understood exactly what was happening. They had already allocated the proceeds from my house, my home, to their own desires. As if confirming my suspicions, Stephanie added, "I was thinking your bedroom furniture is too large for the basement suite. We should sell it along with the house. My interior designer could help find pieces more appropriate for the smaller space." "And what about my art supplies, my books, my garden tools?" I asked. Jeffrey waved dismissively. "Mom, be practical. You won't have room for all that clutter in your new space. Besides, when was the last time you actually painted anything? 25 years ago, I answered quietly, when your father told me my art supplies were making a mess in the spare room. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. In that moment, I made my decision. I would not confront them directly. That would only lead to more manipulation and pressure. Instead, I would take a page from Harold's book and operate independently without consultation. The next morning, I called Thomas Gordon and arranged to meet him privately at his office. I want to go to Valencia, I told him. Not just to visit, to move there permanently. Thomas nodded, unsurprised. I had a feeling you might come to that decision. Harold's property there is substantial and fully furnished. You could relocate with minimal effort. I need to do this without Jeffrey knowing until it's done. Can you help me arrange everything quietly? Absolutely. It's your property and your decision. Let's create a plan. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked methodically, always careful to maintain normal appearances when Jeffrey or Stephanie visited. I set up a new bank account that only Thomas and I knew about. I transferred funds from Harold's pension and investments. I researched expatriate communities in Valencia and connected with American retirees living there through online forums. I sorted through decades of possessions, deciding what to keep, what to sell, and what to leave behind. Photos of Jeffrey growing up. Those would come with me. The expensive jewelry Harold had given me for birthdays and anniversaries. Sold through a discreet broker Thomas recommended with the funds wired directly to my new account. Jane helped me pack essential items and store them in her garage. I can't believe you're really doing this, she said, a mix of worry and admiration in her voice. Neither can I admitted, but I'm also finding I can't imagine staying now. The most difficult part was emotionally detaching from the house that had been my home for 30 years. I walked through each room at night, when I was alone, running my hands over familiar surfaces, saying goodbye to the space where Jeffrey had taken his first steps, where I had hosted countless dinner parties for Harold's colleagues, where I had lived as Mrs. Harold Wallace rather than simply Dora. Through it all, Jeffrey continued his campaign. He brought by real estate listings for condos and retirement communities. Stephanie dropped off brochures about aging in place and transitioning to assisted living. They spoke about my future as if it were a problem to solve, rather than a life to live. The final catalyst came exactly 6 weeks after Harold's funeral. I received a text message from Jeffrey. Start packing, Mom. The house has been sold. We found a buyer willing to close quickly. I'll explain everything on Sunday. I stared at the message, momentarily stunned by his audacity. Then, surprising myself, I laughed out loud. Little did Jeffrey know I had already packed, but not for the destination he had in mind. The morning after Jeffrey's text, I sat at my kitchen table, emotions swirling through me like a storm. Anger at his presumption. Sadness that our relationship had deteriorated to this point. Fear about the drastic step I was preparing to take. But beneath all that was a steadily growing sense of resolve. I called Jeffrey immediately, my voice carefully controlled. What do you mean the house has been sold? I haven't signed anything. His tone was soothing, as if speaking to a confused child. Mom, remember when Dad was updating his will last year? You signed several documents then. One of them gave me authority to manage your affairs if necessary. That's not possible, I said, though a cold dread was spreading through me. Harold had often placed documents before me with a casual, just some routine paperwork, Dora. Sign here and here. It's perfectly legal, Jeffrey assured me. The house sale is already in escrow. The buyers are a lovely young family. You'd approve. They're willing to let you stay until the end of the month while we prepare your suite at our house. I ended the call quickly, my hands shaking. I immediately called Thomas Gordon. Jeffrey claims I signed something giving him power over my assets, I explained frantically. He says the house is already in escrow. That's impossible, Thomas replied firmly. I have copies of everything you and Harold signed. There was no power of attorney granted to Jeffrey. He's bluffing Dora. But what if Harold had other papers drawn up, documents you don't know about? Even if such documents existed, which I seriously doubt, they wouldn't supersede Harold's will, which left everything directly to you. Jeffrey has no legal right to sell your house without your explicit consent. Thomas's reassurance calmed me somewhat, but I knew Jeffrey wouldn't back down easily. He truly believed he was acting in my best interest, just as Harold had always believed his control was for my own good. That evening, Jeffrey and Stephanie arrived unannounced, carrying takeout dinner and a bottle of wine. Their forced cheerfulness immediately put me on guard. "We thought we'd celebrate," Jeffrey announced, setting the food on the dining room table. The house sold for even more than we anticipated. I remained standing, arms crossed. "I spoke with Thomas today. He says I never signed a power of attorney." Jeffrey's smile tightened. "Thomas is mistaken. Dad handled certain matters with another attorney." "Which attorney?" "What's their name?" He waved dismissively. "That's not important right now. What matters is that we've secured your future. The basement suite is being renovated as we speak." Stephanie chimed in. "We're installing those grab bars you'll need in the bathroom, and we've measured for a twin bed, since your queen won't fit in the space." "A twin bed," I repeated flatly. "In your basement. How considerate." "Mom?" Jeffrey's voice took on that patient tone that Harold had often used when I was being difficult. "We're trying to help you. You're alone now. You need family support." "What I need is respect," I countered. "Respect for my autonomy and my choices." Stephanie exchanged a look with Jeffrey that clearly communicated she's being unreasonable again. "Dora," Stephanie said sweetly, "change is hard at any age, but especially for seniors. It's natural to resist at first, but you'll see this is for the best once you're settled." "I'm not moving into your basement, Stephanie. The house sale isn't valid. I never authorized it." Jeffrey's facade finally cracked. "For God's sake, Mom, why are you fighting this? We're offering you a secure future with your family. What more could you want?" "Freedom," I said simply. "The freedom to make my own choices even if you disagree with them." He slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses jump. "This isn't about freedom. It's about practicality, about family responsibility, about using Dad's assets wisely." There it was, the truth behind his concern. Not my well-being, but Dad's assets. "Your father left everything to me, Jeffrey. Not to you, not to Amanda, to me. Because he expected me to guide you," Jeffrey shouted, his composure completely gone now. "He knew you couldn't manage on your own." The silence that followed his outburst was deafening. Even Stephanie looked uncomfortable. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. They left without another word, the untouched takeout still on my dining table. I knew the battle was far from over. Jeffrey would return with new tactics, new pressures, perhaps even legal threats based on fabricated documents. I called Jane immediately. "I need to accelerate the plan. How quickly can you drive me to the airport?" "You're really doing this?" Jane sounded both excited and concerned. "I have to. If I stay, Jeffrey will wear me down eventually. He'll find some way to take control, just as Harold always did." The next morning, I called Thomas from Jane's house, where I'd spent the night. "Is everything ready in Valencia?" "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "The property manager has aired out the house and stocked the kitchen basics. Your new bank account is active there. The only thing missing is you." "I'm ready to go. Today, if possible." Thomas was silent for a moment. "Are you sure, Dora? This is a drastic step." "I have spent 68 years being cautious, Thomas, following others' expectations. I don't have time for caution anymore." I spent that day finalizing details with Jane's help. We transferred the last of my chosen possessions from her garage to her car. I wrote a letter to Jeffrey, the hardest thing I've ever had to compose. "My dear son, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Not just from this house, but from this country. I've made the decision to start a new chapter of my life, one where I make my own choices. I know you believe you were acting in my best interest. Your father believed the same throughout our marriage. But good intentions don't justify controlling another person's life. I loved your father, and I love you. That will never change. But I cannot live in your basement surrendering what remains of my independence. I cannot be the compliant mother and grandmother who sits quietly while others decide her fate. The house is indeed yours to sell if you wish. Consider it my gift to you. But my life is my own. Perhaps someday, when you can see me as a person in my own right rather than an extension of your father's estate or a responsibility to manage, we can rebuild our relationship. I hope that day comes. Until then, know that I am safe and happier than I've been in many years. Please don't try to find me. This is my choice, and I ask you to respect it even if you cannot understand it. With love, always, Mom. I sealed the letter in an envelope and left it with Jane, who promised to deliver it to Jeffrey after I was safely out of the country. The next morning, Jane drove me to O'Hare International Airport. We hugged goodbye at the departure terminal, both of us teary-eyed. "Call me when you're settled," she insisted. "And remember, you can always come back if it doesn't work out." "I know," I assured her, "but somehow I think it will." As the plane lifted off, carrying me away from Chicago, away from Harold's shadow and Jeffrey's control, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced in decades: possibility. The vast, open-ended possibility of writing my own story. The Mediterranean sun has a different quality than Chicago sunlight, warmer, more golden, illuminating everything with a soft glow that makes even ordinary objects look beautiful. That was my first impression of Valencia as the taxi drove me from the airport to Harold's, no, my, seaside villa. The property exceeded even the photos I'd seen. 2 stories of white stucco with terracotta roof tiles surrounded by fragrant gardens of lavender and citrus trees. A terrace overlooking the azure waters of the Mediterranean. Inside, the furnishings were minimal but elegant. Harold had clearly intended this as a vacation home rather than a primary residence. The property manager, Lucia, greeted me warmly. She spoke excellent English and had prepared everything according to Thomas's instructions. "The market is just 2 blocks away," she explained, showing me around, "and there is a small community of American and British expatriates nearby. I can introduce you if you wish." "That would be wonderful," I said, feeling simultaneously exhausted from the journey and exhilarated by my new surroundings. That first night, sitting on my terrace with a glass of local wine, watching the sunset over the Mediterranean, I experienced a feeling so unfamiliar it took me moments to identify it: peace. Complete, unqualified peace. No one was monitoring my choices, questioning my decisions, or subtly correcting my behavior. For the first time in 40 years, I was answerable only to myself. The first week passed in a blur of practical arrangements. Setting up utilities in my name, learning the neighborhood, struggling with basic Spanish phrases at local shops. I bought a local phone and gave the number only to Jane and Thomas, with strict instructions not to share it with Jeffrey. 10 days after my arrival, Jane called. "Jeffrey received your letter," she reported. "He's not taking it well." "What do you mean?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "He showed up at my house demanding to know where you've gone. He threatened to call the police and report you missing. I showed him a copy of the letter you left and told him you were a grown woman who had chosen to travel. He stormed out." I sighed heavily. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle, Jane." "Don't be. I'm enjoying watching you finally stand up for yourself after all these years." Over the following weeks, Jeffrey's reactions escalated according to Jane's reports. First came anger, multiple voicemails and texts to my old number which I'd left behind in Chicago. Then panic. Actual missing person reports filed with the Chicago police quickly dismissed when Thomas provided evidence that I had left voluntarily. Finally came bargaining, messages relayed through Jane promising that things would be different if I returned. Thomas kept me updated on the legal side. As expected, Jeffrey had no actual power of attorney documents. His claims had been a bluff banking on my habitual compliance. The house in Chicago remained unsold, though Jeffrey and Stephanie had apparently moved in to maintain the property. "Let them have it," I told Thomas. "I have no intention of returning. They can live there or sell it. I don't care anymore." Meanwhile, my new life in Valencia began to take shape. I joined a local art class, finally returning to the passion I'd abandoned decades ago at Harold's insistence. My first watercolor attempts were clumsy, but my instructor, Carmen, was encouraging. "You have a good eye," she told me. "You just need practice." I made friends among the expatriate community, particularly with Elaine, a 72-year-old widow from Boston, who had moved to Spain after her husband's death 10 years earlier. "Best decision I ever made," she confided over coffee at a seaside cafe. "My children were horrified at first, thought I'd lost my mind. Now they visit every summer with the grandkids. They've come to accept that this is my life now." "I hope Jeffrey comes around eventually," I admitted. "I miss him despite everything." "Give him time," Elaine advised. "My Richard was furious for nearly a year. Children have fixed ideas about who their parents are supposed to be, especially their mothers. It takes time for them to adjust when we step outside those expectations. 4 months after my arrival, I received my first email from Jeffrey. It had been forwarded through Thomas to maintain the privacy of my new location. Mom, I don't understand why you've done this. Dad would be so hurt by your abandonment of the family. Stephanie and Amanda ask about you constantly. We're worried about your health, your safety being alone in a foreign country at your age. Please reconsider this reckless decision. Your home and family are here. Whatever problems you thought we had, we can work through them together. Jeffrey. I read the message several times, noting what was missing, any acknowledgement that he had overstepped any recognition of my right to make my own choices, any question about whether I was happy in my new life. His concern remained firmly focused on what my absence meant for him and his family, not what my presence in Valencia might mean for me. I replied simply, Jeffrey, I am safe, healthy, and happier than I've been in many years. This was not a reckless decision, but a carefully considered one. I did not abandon my family. I chose a different path for myself after decades of putting everyone else first. When you're ready to accept that I am a person with my own desires and rights, not just your mother and Harold's widow, perhaps we can rebuild our relationship. Until then, I wish you and your family well. Mom, 6 months became a year. Slowly, I created a life that felt authentically mine. I joined a book club with other expatriates. I took Spanish lessons twice weekly. My painting improved steadily, and I even sold 2 small watercolors at a local art fair, a thrill I never would have experienced if I'd remained in Chicago. I made my villa truly mine, replacing Harold's austere furnishings with colorful local pieces. I planted a garden with vegetables and flowers. I adopted an older cat from the local shelter and named her Liberty, Libby for short. Jane visited for 2 weeks, marveling at the transformation in me. You look younger, she observed, more vibrant. Spain agrees with you. Freedom agrees with me, I corrected her. On the anniversary of my arrival in Valencia, I received another email from Jeffrey. The tone had shifted subtly. Mom, it's been a year since you left. Amanda asks about you often. She's doing well in school and has started taking art classes. I thought you'd want to know. Stephanie and I have decided to sell the Chicago house after all. The maintenance is more than we anticipated. I suppose you knew that all along. Thomas refuses to tell me where exactly you are, saying only that you're safe and well. I hope that's true. Jeffrey. I detected the first hint of acceptance in his message, though still no acknowledgement of his attempted control. I replied with more warmth this time, sharing small details about my life in Valencia, my painting, my garden, my new friends. I included a recent photo of myself on the beach, smiling and tanned. I wanted him to see that I was thriving, not suffering as he might have imagined. 2 years into my Spanish life, I received a surprise email. Mom, Stephanie, Amanda, and I are planning a European vacation this summer. We'll be in Barcelona for a week in July. I know it's not Valencia, but it's the same country at least. Would you consider meeting us there? Amanda really wants to see her grandmother. Jeffrey. I sat with the request for several days, unsure how to respond. Was this a genuine olive branch or another attempt to pressure me? Finally, I decided to take the risk. We arranged to meet at a restaurant in Barcelona's Gothic quarter. I arrived early, nervous but resolved. When I saw them enter, Jeffrey looking older than I remembered, Stephanie tense, and Amanda almost a teenager now, my heart constricted with a complex mix of love and apprehension. Amanda spotted me first and ran ahead. Grandma, she called, throwing her arms around me. You look so different. Good different, I hope. I laughed, hugging her tightly. You look happy, Jeffrey said, carefully studying my face. Really happy. I am. I confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. That lunch was awkward, but civil. We carefully avoided discussing the past, focusing instead on Amanda's school activities and their vacation plans. As we were finishing dessert, Jeffrey finally broached the subject. Mom, I've had a lot of time to think this past year. I handled things badly after Dad died. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was controlling, like Dad was. I nearly dropped my spoon in shock. This admission was more than I had ever expected. Thank you for saying that, I managed. I don't agree with all your choices, he continued, but I can see you're doing well here. Better than well. I am, I confirmed. For the first time in decades, I'm living my own life, not someone else's version of what my life should be. Jeffrey nodded slowly. Would you consider Would you be willing to have us visit you in Valencia before we return to the States? I'd like to see where you live now. 3 days later, they came to my villa. I watched Jeffrey's expression as he took in the stunning view from my terrace, the art supplies scattered around my sunlit studio, the evidence of a life well lived on my own terms. Dad never mentioned this place, he said quietly. It's beautiful. Your father had his own ideas about our retirement, I replied. They didn't include me pursuing painting or making independent decisions. Amanda was fascinated by my artwork and begged for a lesson. As I showed her how to mix watercolors, I caught Stephanie watching us with a thoughtful expression. You're different here, she observed when Amanda stepped away. More present somehow. I'm myself here, I corrected gently. The self I never got to be with Harold or even with Jeffrey after he grew up. Being someone's wife and someone's mother are beautiful roles, but they shouldn't be the only roles we're allowed to play. When they left the next day, Jeffrey hugged me tightly. Will you come visit us sometime in Chicago? Perhaps, I said. But my home is here now. He nodded, finally understanding. I know, but you're always welcome with us. Not in the basement, he added with a self-deprecating smile, but as our honored guest. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Jeffrey and I continue to rebuild our relationship slowly and carefully. He emails regularly now. Amanda has visited twice more, showing a genuine interest in art that creates a bond between us. As I approach my 70th birthday, I look back on the last 3 years with a sense of wonder. How different my life might have been if I'd continued the pattern of compliance that defined my 4 decades with Harold. If I'd moved into Jeffrey's basement, surrendering my last years to another person's control. If I'd never experienced the joy of painting on my terrace as the Mediterranean sun sets, or the satisfaction of navigating a Spanish market with my now fluent language skills, or the simple freedom of making my own choices without justification or apology. I am no longer the shadow of Harold Wallace. I am no longer defined primarily as Jeffrey's mother. At 69 years old, my life has truly begun. And the most surprising thing is, I don't feel too old to start over. Not at all. If you've stayed with my story this far, I'd love to know. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own happiness? What would you have done in my situation? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your life and find your own path to happiness.